Sophia Carter stepped into the lavish showroom of Hamilton Prestige Motors, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had spent years driving a worn-out sedan, and today she was finally ready to purchase a brand-new car. But as she walked through the gleaming dealership, her simple attire, a modest blouse and well-worn jeans, immediately attracted disapproving glances. A sharply dressed salesman, his name tag reading Eric Monroe, sized her up with a condescending smirk. He sauntered over, eyes brimming with arrogance. "Ma'am," he said, voice dripping with insincerity, "I think the used car lot is more your speed. The vehicles here start at 6 figures. Sophia straightened her posture. "I know exactly where I am," she replied calmly, "and I'd like to see the latest Mercedes S-Class." Eric chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but we cater to serious buyers. Maybe come back when you've done your research." A few other employees snickered from a distance. The humiliation burned in her chest, but Sophia refused to let it show. She nodded once, turned on her heel, and walked out of the dealership, their laughter echoing behind her. The next day, Hamilton Prestige Motors was about to get the shock of a lifetime. A gleaming jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided onto the dealership's lot. Its sheer presence commanded attention, the deep growl of its engine silencing the usual chatter among the sales staff. The doors opened, and a sharply dressed chauffeur stepped out, walking around to open the rear passenger door. Sophia Carter emerged, looking effortlessly elegant in a tailored navy dress. But it wasn't just her transformation that left the employees speechless. It was the towering figure stepping out after her. Jonathan Carter, a billionaire investor, real estate mogul, and the owner of one of the largest automotive chains in the country. A man whose presence alone sent shockwaves through the business world. Eric Monroe, who had dismissed Sophia just a day prior, felt the color drain from his face. Sophia smiled pleasantly. "I believe you mentioned something about serious buyers. Yesterday?" Jonathan's icy gaze swept across the room. "My wife was here to purchase a car, and instead, she was treated like an inconvenience." His voice was calm, but the underlying authority made everyone stiffen. The dealership manager rushed forward, stammering, "Mr. Carter, we had no idea." Jonathan raised a hand, silencing him. Then he turned to Sophia. "Darling, should we buy the entire dealership today, or just a few cars?" Eric's knees nearly buckled. Sophia tapped a thoughtful finger against her chin. I was thinking a couple of Rolls-Royces, and perhaps one for every employee here, as a lesson in humility." The entire room fell into stunned silence, and that was just the beginning. The stunned silence inside the dealership stretched for what felt like an eternity. Eric Monroe's face was now ashen, and the other employees who had laughed at Sophia yesterday were frozen in place. No one had expected this. No one had even imagined that the woman they had dismissed so easily would return with the power to buy them all out. Jonathan Carter's eyes roamed over the dealership, unimpressed. "On second thought," he said slowly, "I don't think I want my wife driving a car from a dealership that treats customers like garbage." The manager, a short, balding man named Richard Lawson, nearly tripped over himself to intervene. "Sir, please, this is all a big misunderstanding. If we had known—" Jonathan cut him off with a sharp glare. "That's the problem, isn't it? You only treat people with respect if you know they have money." He turned to Sophia, his voice softening. "Darling, what do you think? Should we take our business elsewhere?" Sophia tilted her head, pretending to consider. No. I was really excited about that S-Class." She turned to Eric, her smile razor sharp. "Tell me, do you think I'm serious enough to buy it now?" Eric swallowed hard. Of course, ma'am. I apologize for—" Sophia waved, a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't bother. I wouldn't buy a car from you if you paid me." Jonathan smirked. "Well, I suppose that settles it. We'll take our business elsewhere." He snapped his fingers, and the chauffeur immediately walked over to open the Rolls-Royce door for Sophia. She stepped in gracefully, and just before Jonathan followed, he turned to Richard, the manager. "By the way, I own a major stake in the parent company that supplies the most exclusive cars to this dealership. After today, that's going to change Richard's face crumpled. "Please, Mr. Carter, let's talk about this." But Jonathan was already sliding into the car. The chauffeur shut the door, and the sleek Rolls-Royce glided away, leaving behind a dealership full of employees who had just realized they had made the biggest mistake of their careers. But the story didn't end there. Sophia and Jonathan didn't just leave the dealership behind. They made sure the lesson stuck. The next morning, headlines were ablaze with the story of Hamilton Prestige Motors and their humiliating encounter with the billionaire's wife. The news spread like wildfire. Customers canceled their orders. Calls flooded the dealership, demanding explanations. And worst of all, Jonathan Carter's business influence ensured that their supply of high-end cars suddenly dried up. Within weeks, the once thriving dealership was on the verge of shutting down. Meanwhile, Sophia had moved on. One afternoon, she and Jonathan strolled through an exclusive private showroom where the latest luxury cars were displayed. A respectful salesman guided them through, offering insights without an ounce of condescension. Sophia paused beside a gleaming silver Bentley. She ran her fingers over the hood, smiling. "I think this one," she said. Jonathan grinned. "Then it's yours." As they finalized the purchase, Sophia glanced at the salesman's name tag. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Ellis. You treat your customers well." Ellis beamed. "It's how business should be, ma'am." Sophia and Jonathan exchanged a knowing look. Yes, that was exactly how business should be. And as they drove away in their brand new Bentley, Hamilton Prestige Motors faded into nothing more than a cautionary tale, one that everyone in the industry would remember for years to come. While Sophia and Jonathan enjoyed their new luxury vehicle, the chaos at Hamilton Prestige Motors only worsened. The once bustling dealership now stood nearly empty, save for a few desperate salesmen pacing around, hoping for customers who never came. Eric Monroe, the arrogant salesman who had dismissed Sophia, sat in the manager's office, his leg bouncing nervously. Across from him, Richard Lawson, the dealership manager, rubbed his temples, his face slick with stress-induced sweat. "This is a disaster," Richard muttered. "Sales are down by 70%. We've lost nearly all of our high-end clientele. And worst of all, we're blacklisted from receiving the newest models." Eric swallowed hard. "Maybe we should reach out to Mr. Carter. Apologize. Offer him something. Anything." Richard shot him a glare. "You think a man like Jonathan Carter cares about an apology?" He let out a bitter laugh. "He doesn't want an apology. He wants us to burn." Eric shifted in his seat. "Then what do we do?" Richard exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know, but if we don't figure something out fast, this dealership is finished." While Hamilton Prestige Motors scrambled to stay afloat, Sophia wasn't done making her point. A week after their fateful visit to the dealership, she and Jonathan were at an exclusive charity gala, an event attended by some of the wealthiest and most influential figures in the business world. The chandeliers glittered, the scent of fine champagne filled the air, and the soft hum of classical music played in the background. Sophia, now dressed in a breathtaking emerald gown, stood at Jonathan's side as they mingled with other guests. Then a familiar voice reached her ears. "I just don't understand it. One bad interaction, and suddenly, we're the villains? It's ridiculous." Sophia turned. There, standing near the bar, was Richard Lawson, complaining loudly to a small group of businessmen. Beside him stood Eric, who looked more like a nervous wreck than the cocky salesman he had once been. Sophia exchanged a glance with Jonathan. Without a word, they moved toward the group. "Mr. Lawson," Jonathan said smoothly, his voice laced with amusement. "Complaining about the consequences of your own actions?" Richard stiffened. He turned, his face draining of color when he saw who was speaking. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, I didn't expect to see you here." Sophia smiled. "Didn't you?" Eric cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we just wanted to—" Jonathan held up a hand. "Save it. Your business decisions have nothing to do with us. Your reputation was built on how you treated people when you thought they had nothing. And now?" He gestured around the room. "It seems the business world is simply holding you accountable." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sophia leaned in slightly, her voice gentle but laced with steel. "Consider this a lesson. You never know who you're talking to. Next time, try treating everyone with respect." With that, she and Jonathan turned and walked away, leaving Richard and Eric standing there, their reputations in ruins, their business on the brink of collapse. A month later, Hamilton Prestige Motors shut down for good. A new dealership took its place, one owned by none other than Jonathan Carter. And the first customer to walk through its gleaming doors? Sophia Carter. She stepped inside, a knowing smile on her lips as she was greeted warmly by the staff. She ran a hand along the hood of a sleek new Rolls-Royce before turning to the friendly salesman assisting her. "I think I'll take this one." And this time, no one dared to question whether she was a serious buyer. The grand reopening of the dealership under Jonathan Carter's ownership was an event like no other. The new showroom gleamed with luxury, the scent of freshly polished leather filling the air. Every car in the lot was a statement of prestige, and every employee, handpicked by Jonathan himself, had been trained to treat every customer with the utmost respect, no matter their appearance. Sophia stood at the entrance, watching as guests arrived for the launch event. Dressed in an elegant, white suit, she radiated confidence and satisfaction. This was more than just a business move. It was justice served in the most poetic way possible. As she admired the transformation, a familiar, hunched figure caught her eye. Richard Lawson. His once arrogant demeanor was gone, replaced by a defeated slouch. He wasn't here as an invited guest. He was here out of desperation. Sophia arched a brow as Richard approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice strained. I just wanted to say I was wrong. About everything." She tilted her head. "Go on." Richard swallowed hard. "The dealership went under, as you know. I lost everything. My reputation, my position, my livelihood." He hesitated before adding, "And Eric, he didn't take it well. The man's in deep debt, trying to stay afloat. I hear he's working at a used car lot now." Sophia remained silent, letting him stew in his own words. "I came here today," Richard continued, "hoping maybe you'd have a place for me here. I know cars, I know sales, and I've learned my lesson." Sophia studied him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she let the weight of his request settle between them. Then she smiled. "You know, Richard," she said, her tone light but firm, "I believe in second chances, but only for those who truly deserve them." His eyes lit up with hope. "But you?" Her smile turned icy. "You don't." Richard's expression crumbled. "I hope you find your way," Sophia said smoothly, stepping past him. "But it won't. Be here." As Richard stood there, speechless and defeated, Sophia entered the dealership, her dealership now, and was greeted warmly by the new staff. Under Sophia and Jonathan's ownership, the new dealership flourished. It became a symbol of excellence, not just in luxury cars, but in how people were treated. Every customer who walked in was valued, whether they arrived in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce or on foot. And as Sophia watched their business grow, she knew one thing for sure. True power wasn't just about money. It was about how you used it. And she had used hers to teach an unforgettable lesson.